Hi, and welcome to the Chasing Care podcast. On today's episode, we're talking to Matt Pink from Dryy. Now, you might be wondering what Dryy is all about. Well, we'll come to that in a bit. But there is one thing for sure, and we need to talk about it, and that is the effect that families are facing right now when it comes down to the sandwich generation. Now, the sandwich generation is something that we haven't really talked about very much recently, but it's a big subject because the sandwich generation looks at the family member that's feeling guilty about looking after their children, their parents, and maybe even their grandparents. They're frustrated, they're anxious. And one thing that they do tend to do, because statistics tell us this, is that they may turn to alcohol as a coping mechanism. Now, I have to admit, I am alcohol free and I have been alcohol free for over 5 years now. But that's not the reason why I've got Matt on here, because that was my journey. And we need to explore why people might turn to alcohol and what that might mean in terms of how they can improve their lives and improve the way they can look after their family members. Because, the sandwich generation, 1 in 4 are suffering from mental health challenges. And that can't be right. So before we go any further, Matt, welcome.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you very much. Great intro and really interesting topic. So I'm happy to be here discussing it with you today.
Well, as I said, we're not talking necessarily about the alcoholics and about those people that can give up drinking willy-nilly. I was never one of those people, to be fair. And it sort of came into my head the other day that there's a lot of people that I know that are in the sandwich generation because they're in my age bracket, the 40 to 50s plus, where they are looking after children. And that might be now 20-year-old children, 25-year-old children in the home, but at the same time trying to look after their mum or dad who might be living a distance away. And some have grandparents in their 90s. So it's very stressful. And people do tend to turn to drink for stress because they feel that this could be a way to take away that stress. Well, I think that the data is wrong in their heads, and we need to explore that. So before we get going, from your experience, why do people drink and why are they fearful of giving up alcohol for any period of time?
Well, I think it's a big question. I think if you look in the UK, I think it's part of the culture, isn't it? It's what we brought up with. And I think definitely in my case, in the case of many, it's what you're used to when you grow up and you have your mum and dad have parties and barbecues and you go to christenings and weddings and funerals and sort of everything was surrounded by alcohol. And it was kind of from a child perspective, you look at them and you see them getting progressively happier and you hear their laughing getting louder and louder. And I can remember certain times of my childhood looking up thinking, can't wait to do that. I cannot wait to do that. That looks so much fun. And everywhere you look, everyone's doing it because you're surrounded by it. And I sort of loved it personally. That's what I loved about the culture for many years. And it's giving up isn't something that definitely wasn't something that people even knew existed. And in my own story, only nearly 5 years ago, I always say that if you talk to me about someone that gave up alcohol, I'd think they were like pregnant or antibiotics or were a bit weird. And actually, it's becoming like one of the fastest growing wellness trends because people are just doing it and people are seeing how they look and how they change and how successful they are and what's happening in their lives and all positives. And then people are catching on. And I think the more information that's available these days, which is the evolution of the internet, means that people are starting to wear things like whoops and starting to track their heart rate and their heart rate variability. And they're starting to realize actually that this thing here, when I drink, it's not doing me any favors. And I can see the correlation in my own health now. So people are starting to wake up to it, which is why it's becoming so popular. And which is why we're really sort of at the crest, coming towards the crest of a wave with it, really. I think it's about to roll into shore pretty hard as the numbers keep growing and people keep waking up to it. That's my personal view on it.
6 million Britons are in the sandwich generation. That means to say that they're going to be very busy. I've also read that some people are spending an additional 20 hours of their life every week looking after family members. That's in addition to working. So it's no wonder, really, that they might have some mental health challenges. And the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, talk around this. They do say that people are not enjoying life, they're less satisfied, and in fact, they're financially struggling too. I mean, it's just a whole picture, isn't it? And it doesn't seem to me, from my experience, that many people say, "Oh, give up the booze." They might say, "Give up the fags," if they think your health is a bit deteriorating. But let's explore a little bit more, if we can, about that. I mean, you run Dryy. Tell us what Dryy is about and the experiences that you find with members.
Yeah, so we started Dryy a couple of years ago now, and I wanted to. When I gave up drinking, I wanted to do something that was a bit different because I was conscious that there was like this whole stigma around giving up drinking, and you kind of either go to AA or you don't, and that's kind of it. And I wanted to create something that was a bit more chilled and a bit more fun and a bit more relaxed, because ultimately it's like giving you the best gift in the world when you stop drinking. You get your time back, you get your energy back, you get more money in your back pocket, you become a happier person mentally, you look better physically, everything's better. So why does that need to be discussed in a dark hall, or sat in a circle? And there's nothing wrong with AA, but I think there's definitely opportunity to help more people, and for me, more people in that kind of middle lane to find a home and to find themselves. Because if you, previous to Dryy, in my opinion, if you were giving up drinking for a bit and you wanted to join a community, there wasn't anything out there. When I gave up, I just followed Andy Ramage and sort of hung on his coattails and listened to everything he said, and he was my guy. And now we've got this beast which has got over 25,000 members, and it's only 2 years old, and we've not put any marketing into it. I think it's just purely because people want to do something and they want to do it under the guise of a challenge or a course or a bit of fun, rather than waiting until they have a massive problem and then having to find themselves in AA or the Priory. So it's just carving out the middle lane and also making it established, making it fun, making it vibrant and positive, but also making it welcoming for anyone who's, no matter where they are in that middle lane, whether it's more severe or the lower end of it, come and give it a try and come and have a week off, a month off, and we'll support you. And if you do slip up, we'll support you as well. And even if you just do a month off and you go back to drinking, that's fine as well. There's no kind of like rules with it, other than just have a bit of fun with it and give it a go, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to end up changing your life forever, whether that looks like you change your relationship with alcohol or you give it up, one of the two.
I seem to remember a few years ago when I was thinking about giving up, it was a case of, I don't think that I can survive without a drink. I used to think that I'll never get to sleep because I have a drink to go to sleep. But I didn't like some of the times when I was drinking, because when I woke up, I didn't feel the best. But I must have had a good night's sleep because I had a drink. Is there any truth in people needing a drink to get to sleep, Matt?
Yes, there is actually, but it's not quite. That's not quite the getting to sleep bit. It helps. There's no doubt about that. That the problem comes with, do you want to get to sleep and then be sort of in and out of light sleep, all night, having really poor quality sleep, waking up not feeling refreshed and kind of making the whole thing pointless? Or do you want to get to sleep like as normal and have a great night's sleep and have that regular rhythmic sort of cycles of 90 minutes sleep where you're going into light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep? So there is actually elements of it. It does knock you. And in the day, this is where these whoops and things like that are brilliant, because they can show you that. And I think we do filming a documentary at the minute where one of the guys is actually wearing a whoop and he's giving up drinking. It's quite interesting to see, for people to see. Actually, when you do drink, your resting heart rate and your heart rate variability, and actually the impact it has on dropping you straight into a deep sleep when you've drunk. But you can literally see it on a graph how it pings you straight up. It's like a trampoline effect. It pings you straight back up into that sort of light sleep area where you spend then far more of your night in that zone than you should do. Meaning that when you do wake up, and even if you think you've had 8 hours or 7 hours, the quality of it's horrendous. You feel horrendous, and actually it just starts you off on the wrong foot. And then the problem with that is you think, oh well, at least I've got to sleep all right, and then you have a drink again that night, and then before you know it, 10 years later, you realise that's actually all been a bad idea.
So alcohol actually disrupts your sleep. That's the bottom line.
It disrupts it in a big way, yeah. And even just 1 or 2 glasses of wine can have a really quite impactful. I mean, everyone's different. That's the caveat. Is I used to preach a lot about this because I read a lot about it, I learned a lot about it, and I tracked myself, and it was up to the same answer. But ultimately, everyone's different, so the impact a couple of glasses has on certain people will be very different. And my wife, for example, she has a glass of wine or two, and she genuinely, well, it doesn't affect her. She wakes up feeling right as rain, and it's only really through her talking to her dad about it and having a very separate conversation with him without her there. And he was kind of telling me the same story, and it was kind of like, actually, I think genetically, some people don't have the same disruption, because actually the same people, like my wife and her dad, also are the same people that only will have one glass of wine every so often and won't need to have two or three or knock themselves out like I do, certainly. So I think there's something in that. I don't know what it is, but physiologically or genetically, there's something in the way we're all built. But ultimately, yes, it disrupts everybody's sleeping pattern to a degree.
And I think it's important for us to agree that we are talking about that middle lane drinker. So we're not talking about necessarily the alcoholic. We're talking about the person that maybe turns to it as maybe some form of coping mechanism, stress relief mechanism, or whatever it is. But from your experience with people that have turned to Dryy, is there a particular point when they feel that actually drinking is not good for me? Is it, is there a picture that you can paint for everyone, or is it again different for everyone that comes onto Dryy?
It's different for everyone, but what it does do is it allows people the space, time, support to probably go longer than they've ever gone before. Because it's like, it's certainly in my life, if I went 2 weeks, it was usually because I tried to do dry January or I was ill. It was something like that. Something caused it, because I just wouldn't go a weekend without a drink. When the dry challenges and courses come along and the community people are up for it, they normally do 2-3 weeks, and they're like, feel it's like sort of getting some ice skates for the first time. And you're like wobbly to start with, but then a couple of weeks later you're sort of flying. And that's what we find with people, that it's the certain day of the hump, we call it, that can come at various different times, and that hump being, it's obviously a bit uphill to a degree. And in the early days, you can think, God, as much as I feel good, this is tough. And there was a lady we had on a course the other day, and she said it was 172. She said day 172 was my day where everything suddenly felt a lot easier. And that was quite fairly far down the line, it's sort of half a year, I guess. But she felt from then, she was like, that was it. I just felt like, this is me. I felt so engaged. I felt so positive. Nothing was a struggle. I didn't tick my days off for a few days. It felt I was ticking my weeks and months rather than my days. And it is a bit like pushing the flywheel up the hill, and then you get to a certain point, whatever that means to you, and then it does become so much easier. And that's why I like talking about that all the time, because it's like the people that have never done more than a week, when they're in week 3 and they're looking at their mates and they're all having a drink and they're struggling a little bit, I want them to know that this will not last long. You just got to get through these next few weeks, and your day will come and it'll all be like, finally it makes sense. So yeah, trying to give people a little heads up on what happens up in the future.
Let's put ourselves in that sandwich generation for a second. Let's say that you are that middle-aged woman that is looking after teenage kids. They've got their mum and dad, and they've also got their grandparent to run around after. We can understand that that's quite an awesome scenario that they're facing there. Everybody expects everything from them. And I guess that we can understand why they turn to drink. But how do you feel that they can break that model of turning to drink? Again, is there a particular thing that they should be thinking about doing? Because it must be quite worrying in their minds whether or not they can actually feel better by not having the drink. The drink is the thing that's been helping them, surely. That's what they're thinking.
Exactly, and that's exactly why we started Dryy, because in Dryy, you've got an app which is free, you've got a community which is free, you've got events that are free, and you've got live streams that happen every single day that people can watch and be motivated for. And what we do, we have a lot of lurkers, we call them, that can kind of just come and observe and just listen and figure out a bit more about it, and actually get a bit motivated and excited about the thought of the idea, because they can see people saying, I'm on day 4, I'm flying, I'm on day 12, and I'm doing really well. or I'm on day 16, I've just had a drink and actually I feel like this. So there's all sides of it, but having the space to hang out provides the motivation to potentially have a go at it. But if you didn't have things like that and resources like that, it'd be very tough because you'd be relying on willpower, which is ultimately always going to run out. And if you're in a situation like that in the sandwich generation where you have got a strain pulling you from all pillar to post, you're going to go for the easier option because it's what you've always done. And you're going to go for the easier option because that's what people do. Is what when you turn the TV on and there's something shit going on. Sorry if I can't swear. You can't you you see them pouring a glass of wine. If same, whatever we see, that's the coping mechanism. So it's completely understandable why people would do it. That's why we're trying to just start from the ground up with community spaces like this to help motivate, educate, and inspire people to try it out.
I think we have to agree, though, don't we, that whilst you say try it out, take a look, there's going to be enormous pressures from their peers in society that are saying, come out and have a drink.
Yep, 100%. And that's the same for whether you're in a sandwich generation or you're just a lad about town. That's what it is. And I think ultimately that's why the first step is kind of the awareness of what alcohol is and what it's doing to you. And the second thing is to try and find a home and find people that are doing it. And the third thing is to have a little go at it yourself, whether it's for a day or a week. And it's a solo journey. We always say it's a going sober or taking a break is a solo mission. So you've got to be ready to do it for yourself. And I think the benefit of looking at the sandwich generation is that they're probably, a lot of them are on their knees. So they're kind of realizing subconsciously that whatever they're doing, whatever that is, whether it's booze or not, isn't working because they're crippled by it and they just feel overwhelmed by it. And therefore they might be in a position then to try something completely different, which is where this could come in as well.
And what would you say to somebody that is the mother? I'm just picking on the female side of this. Of course, it could be the male in the relationship that's struggling in the middle. But what about if they're thinking, well, yeah, I think I can do that, but I don't really want to tell anyone because, I just, the pressure's going to come on. So I don't know how best to position it with anybody. I mean, what would you say to those sort of people that do want the help but are worried that others are going to put that pressure on?
Yeah, I think that's where things like Dry January have been really useful because they're providing almost like a gamification of it. And it's like, okay, everyone's doing it for a bit of a laugh and a challenge and even raising some money for charity. So if you hide behind that, if anyone's got a problem with you doing a Dry January course, then they've got a problem themselves. Which it does happen because I used to try and do Dry January myself, and I used to also be the one who would stop people trying to do Dry January and try and sabotage it. So I've kind of seen it from both ends, but I think that's where these things come in. We've got the dry courses. You can put it under whatever guise you want that suits you and your lifestyle, but ultimately you have to be ready to do it for yourself, and the people that love you really love you that will support you at the end.
I think it's a very important thing to say there, that being part of a community means that you're talking to people that have lived that journey and can pass on their experiences. And there must be many, many, many different ways to come at this in terms of one person's got one experience, another one's got another experience, and somebody's got no pressure, but they feel that they want to do it. Another one's got lots of pressure to go back to drinking. I mean, how do we cope with all of these differences?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the community because I've got a men's community off the sesh, and we were up hiking in Helvellyn a few weeks ago, and it suddenly dawned on me that the mix of people that I was with, which was 10 lads, we had everything there covered, from sort of people that work on building sites to people that work on TV to people that have their own successful business to a doctor. Like it was like you could join the perfect. It's like the Avengers assembling. And I didn't realize until I kind of was talking around a table about what everyone did, and everybody's so different. And in our own walks of life, we'd have had our own different challenges, but we've all come together and we've all got this one thing in common, which is giving up the booze and trying to be a better person. And that's bonded us together. So I think that is one of the best things about the alcohol-free community. It is you've got so many different people from so many different countries and so many different walks of life and wealth and race and color and whatever else it is, and they just have the same one thing in common, which is giving up the booze, which is such a powerful thing that it creates incredible bonds.
Let's say that somebody was able to make that first step, because it is the first step. It's always the first step, giving up the booze to try it out, because that's, I think what you're saying is give it a go to see if it changes your life. I think when I was starting my journey, I was a little bit worried in some ways. I know I'm worried, and maybe it's not the word, but concerned that I was expected to become a vegan and run ultra marathons, because that's what people that don't drink do, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is what I did, but I did the same thing. But I think you go on this journey of self discovery where you're like, hang on, I've removed the booze. Now I want to try this. Now I want to try, because if you can do that one thing, you can do anything. So I went down the plant based route for a while and ended up coming out of it because I was like, I missed it too. I missed it having a chicken burger in Nando's. That was my first stumbling block, and then yeah, running as well. Running's helped me massively, and I'd love to run ultra marathons. That's one of my big goals. So that is completely sober cliche person, and even like I said about hiking mountains, I mean, all this stuff that I never would have done before. But I think you've been stuck behind the eight ball for so long in life, and then suddenly that clears, and you go, actually, yeah, no matter what age you are, I can do this. I've got the energy for it and motivation for it. So, but that manifests itself as various different things. I think one of the most common things is running and hiking, but equally, people are doing loads of stuff with their newfound time, whether that's starting. I've got a girl I've been coaching who's just started learning to be a yoga instructor. I've got a lad that does orienteering, another lad who started bouldering. Like there's various different things that people do. It's just that's what life's all about, isn't it? Just learning new things. I've just hit my 365-day streak on Duolingo, which is I've been learning Spanish every day for 365 days.
Oh, wow.
So that's another bit of a sober one that people do, and it just provides you the consistency to be able to do stuff. So yeah, in the last 12 months, I'm learning Spanish, I'm learning skiing, and I'm learning golf. So I've kind of, alongside running and changing my diet every 5 seconds, I'm doing it all, mate. But I think that's what this platform it provides you.
All right, well, let's have a think about that for a second. There's only 24 hours in a day. That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So where have you found all of this time to learn Spanish, play golf, and what was the other one?
And that's the thing, skiing. But
Skiing.
so
Not well. We don't get much snow in the UK, but there you go.
no, so they've all come sort of one at a time. And golf's, I've only just started golf 2 months ago, and I'm doing one lesson a month. So when I say I'm learning it, yeah, it's an hour a month. So I think that's fairly easy to do. Running is something I've always kind of done the gym, but never really made that much progress. And like this morning, I went for a run, and it was 26 minutes. So like again, not a big deal, not a massive time out of your day. Obviously, as the distances start creeping up, it is. But you find the time at the weekend to do the long run. You just get these done, and actually, what I find with running is I find a lot less. It's a lot less of my time, so I can leave from home and get home. And whereas I go to the gym, I've got to drive to the gym. I'll go to the gym. Sometimes I have a sauna, and I get changed, and I get back, and it's 2 hours later. So I think running's actually a bit of a time saver. And skiing was just something I wanted to do my whole life, and I've looked at always this time of year, January, February, when people are skiing, I've always looked at their Instagram and thought, "Cool, that's like, what an idiot."
But hold on though, if they go skiing, they got après ski, so that means they're boozing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It is a big part of it, and I wanted to witness it all myself. I wanted to go and see what it was like. So a couple of years ago, I learned how to ski, and then I went skiing, and I loved skiing. And now I've had like 2 lessons since then, and we're going again in January. So yeah, it's just one of those things. There's nothing better like for me getting up early, first one on the ski lifts, fresh snow, enjoying the day, good workout in the sunshine, nice food, get back, you're absolutely knackered, go back to bed, and you enjoy being in the mountains, you enjoy the surroundings, you enjoy working out, and you enjoy learning a new skill. I think that's for me is what life's all about, and I think that's what alcohol prevents you from doing a lot of the time.
You've clearly changed your routine then. I mean, what did it used to feel like when you were actually boozing? What did you do? Was it sit on the sofa and watch TV, drinking beers? I don't know. You tell me. What was your life like before you found this fresh look?
I was the classic grey area drinker, because grey area drinker is someone who drinks moderately, drinks a lot sometimes, gets absolutely drunk at the weekend sometimes, but sometimes also doesn't drink. And I was all of those things. I'd go through little spells. I'm quite faddy, so I'd do a bit of, I'd do 5, 6, 7 days off it sometimes, very rarely, but a good break off it and feel really good. And then I would go and absolutely hammer it and sort of make up for lost time. There was months and years of my life where I was drinking 5, 6 days a week, couple of 4 or 5 beers a day. There was times when I was having real big parties and doing other drugs that were kind of keeping me up all night and going for 2, 3 days at a time. So that was towards the end, really. But I've kind of done it all, really. And there wasn't really a normal thing other than I just used to regularly drink, and I'll quite often drink beers. And then mainly at the weekend, after a few beers, I'd have a few vodkas until I got to that sort of knockout stage where I was like, oh, fine, I could go to bed now. And yeah, and that caused me to have rubbish sleep. I'd wake up late, and you say about having time, but I'd wake up probably 2, 3 hours after what I wake up now on a Saturday and a Sunday. Whereas now you're getting 6, 7, 8 hours more in your weekend because you're not doing that, and that's just in the morning, let alone in the evening where you sit there doing nothing. So yeah, it was pretty normal drinking, I'd say, normal for my environment and the people I used to hang around with, but maybe not normal for everyone else.
And you felt at the time what taking a break for a few days would fix your liver, did you?
I thought, to be honest with you, I just got pretty heavy towards the end, and I was dealing with grief. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. I started to rely on it a little bit more, and the more I relied on it, the more I started then smoking and started sniffing, and all the beautiful things that come with it that I thought at the time. And so I was doing it all, and I was a bit of self-destruct mode. So that was driving me down a path pretty fast. But with ultimately alcohol being the gateway drug, so I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, I wasn't sniffing. It was like I could see what was there, I could see the obvious problem, but I didn't really know what to do. So then, yeah, I found Andy. I decided to get sober curious, I guess, listen to a few podcasts, read a few books, and there we go. Took a break and went back to it. Took a few weeks off, went back to it. Probably a month off, went back to it. Over a series of time, I was like weighing it up, and I was like, this is a bit of a no-brainer. And then the lockdown came along, and I hit the lockdown hard for the first week or two, 3 weeks. I was like gathering booze from all the local shops, panicking, thinking, well, everyone had toilet roll, I had bottles of wine. And then I was like, and then I was sitting there just drinking Kronenbergs at home in the daytime, thinking, this is actually not good. This is rubbish. I don't actually enjoy this. I want to be outside. Everyone's outside running. It's beautiful weather. And I could see everyone on social media doing like 5K challenges and stuff. I thought, I know enough of this now that I want to do that. I want to be that guy. Yeah, I just randomly decided on a day in April in 2020 that was it. And yeah, ever since then, it's been a pretty straightforward journey, I'd say.
And in truth, if we think about the social side, there's a change of emphasis now in the alcohol community, isn't there? There's a lot of new brands. I remember 5 years ago, there was only probably one alcohol-free beer in Sainsbury's that I could remember, and that was shite.
Beck's Blue.
And then, yeah, Beck's. And then we got some red wine came out, which is still shite,
Yeah.
mind you. So don't go down the red wine group route. If anybody's interested, don't do that. But what do you think's happened in the community, in the brewery community? Because I think you know quite a lot about it, don't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, it all comes back to this information availability thing and the fitness world, and also like I know we're speaking about sandwich generation in terms of caring, but also there's a sandwich generation in terms of drinking, because as a 41-year-old, everyone above me, my parents and all their friends were big boozers and they were pub drinkers, and that was their culture. But as my kids have got older and older, I've started to realise, and my daughter's 16 now, that they're not drinking. So I think it's a few things. There's information overload. People are much more health conscious. The boom of the internet, social media. People are looking on social media and aspiring to be everyone they look at. Therefore, generally speaking, people are getting a lot healthier and leaner. Obesity is definitely not what it was. And people are just more conscious of what they look like because they've got their own profile on social media. Plus, the kids are coming up and not drinking, and they're fitter and faster than ever, ready to take everything off you if you drop a ball. So I think all of that has caused the movement in people drinking less. And you've seen that through pub closures, bar closures, nightclubs closing down, and the emergence of the alcohol-free market is obviously natural because we want to keep drinking. We like the taste of beer. We like going out and doing things, but we don't want to have the side effects from it. So, yeah, I think it's a brilliant thing, and it's obviously huge now, the alcohol-free market. The beers are better than ever. The wines are still rubbish. The spirits are good. But equally, I don't have that many of them anymore anyway. Like, it's kind of, after you've done it a few years, you kind of do it as a bit of a special occasion, but not something you particularly need.
Yeah, on a personal note, I went to my fridge the other day. My 21-year-old was standing there. I said, "Do you want an alcohol-free beer?" I pulled it out, and it was out of date in 2023 December.
Wow. Yeah.
That's how often I now drink. And it was a Guinness 0.0, which was my favourite go-to.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend them, by the way. They are a very nice drink, which sort of reminds me of an Andy Ramage podcast where he mentioned about Ireland, where he goes in pubs now and you see the 70-year-old sat at the bar stool drinking Guinness, and then the son comes in and sits next to him, orders himself a Guinness, but it's actually 0.0.
Yeah,
That's a significant change. If it's happening in Ireland, it can happen anywhere, can't it?
definitely. They love it in Ireland. I've been over there a few times, and every time I go and order one, I speak to like the bar staff, and I'm like, "How many of these do you sell?" And like when I went last time, which was only a few weeks ago, the girl behind the bar was like, "We can't keep up with it. It's insane." And people are just, she said it's like something like 1 in 3 pints is 0.0 in their pub, which if you consider that's in Dublin, that's a lot.
So that sort of begs the question, doesn't it? Talking back to the audience today, that they shouldn't feel that they can't go out and socialise alcohol free because it's becoming more socially acceptable. It certainly wasn't socially acceptable 5 years ago in the same way that maybe it is now. What would you agree with that?
Definitely, but equally, you got to be ready for it yourself. Like, I know I was benefited from the lockdown because I was a bit of a social animal, so I had to stay away from bars, pubs, but also I couldn't go to bars and clubs because it was a lockdown. So when I was ready to go back, I went back. So people have got to do it at their own pace because it's like that whole thing. If you sit in the barbers long enough, you're going to get your hair cut. So if you try and stay away from the pubs as long as you can, otherwise you're putting yourself in a bit of danger.
I haven't got enough hair to cut these days, so I can sit in the barbers all day long. It wouldn't make a jot of difference to me. But that said, I would also suggest to you that if you give it up long enough, the booze, you actually find it almost weird that people are drinking.
Yeah, you can always, it's weird, isn't it? You can like smell it. It's
Yeah, that smell, isn't it? It is that smell. Especially, I mean, I'm a referee, rugby referee, and on a Saturday, when you're refereeing and the scrummage comes together and you can smell the beer off the breath of the front row players, it's not a nice thing. I feel sorry for their partners, wives or boyfriends or whatever they have, if they're having to deal with that. But that used to be me. It used to be you, of course.
Yeah, and even where my missus went out a few weeks ago and she had a rare night out and she came in at like 1 a.m. and she like tried to, the whole like trying to be quiet while I was like asleep. I was trying to be asleep. She was trying to be quiet and she got into bed. And I was like, oh my God, she stinks. And it's amazing. And she's not, like I said, she's not even a big drinker. She'd probably only have 3 or 4 of the whole night. And it's just that smell of it. It's just bizarre that you're just so oblivious to it when you do it yourself. I think back to actually how many, because I used to have quite a decent job, and the amount of times I'd go and be drinking at a silly o'clock and end up going into a meeting in the morning. Just think, God, I must have either got away with that, or they must have been ignoring it, or they must have been in the same boat.
I think it depends what industry you are in, but there's certainly a lot of people that do go to work and they have had a drink and their performance must be way down. And if you're struggling to cope with your kids, you're going to get stroppy with them, aren't you? In the morning, if you don't feel great, you're going to get stroppy with your kids. You're going to not want to go and see your mum or dad after work because you're knackered, because you still feel shit after drinking a few beers. I mean, I find it difficult to imagine why people still fall down that trap. But it's reality, isn't it? It's just reality.
Yeah, and I always say you can't read the label when you're inside the jar, and I think that's a good analogy for it because whilst it's easy to look back on now and see how mad it is in that jar, until you get out of it, it's only then you realise, and it's just the norm, isn't it? When you're doing it, it's just the norm. You look around, everyone's doing it, and going back to sort of mental health and suffering, it's almost the norm. Everyone's popping pills and putting on a brave face, and you can see behind the eyes, but you're sort of ignoring it because they're sort of ignoring it through you. And yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, really. But I think that's the benefit of the alcohol-free market getting bigger and bigger is you get more people that are doing it less and less. Therefore, the mental health crisis should start to ease at some point. It'll start being, again, that sort of trampoline moment, hopefully, when we start the fight back, because the numbers are only going one way, which will only be indicative of the way that goes as well.
Yeah, I mean, the cumulative effects of even moderate alcohol use are not really good for your liver. In fact, there was a BBC, I think it was Panorama, wasn't it? The other day, they were reflecting on a young person, I think she's 30 odd,
Yeah,
who'd been a middle lane drinker and basically was told your liver's about screwed.
yeah, and bizarre. It's good that the BBC are finally doing things like that because, again, the rise of the knowledge, the people are starting to be aware of it. The big breweries are getting involved with the beers. I think it's only natural now the big corporations are starting to do something and flag it as well. So yeah, it seems like the time is now.
So middle lane drinking affects stress levels. It can affect energy and sleep levels. It can have mental health impacts, decision making, your health, and many other things. It can affect lots of different things. And we want to try and help people get away from that if at all possible. And it's not right for everyone. Not everyone feels that they need it to take a break, but there's a lot of people that maybe could or should. And hopefully, this episode is giving some people some cause for thought. Just paint a picture, if you would, regarding the Dryy app. If somebody was sober curious, you say that the Dryy community can help them. If they were to show an interest, what should they do? What would you recommend they do?
Just download the app. It's completely free. So it's Dryy, Dryy. It's a free app with a free community. So come in, have a look. You can just lurk, like I said, just scroll through the feeds. It's very much laid out in like an Instagram style. You don't have to post anything, but obviously the more you put in, the more you get out. And there's various different things we do. We're doing a dry January course, which will be a month and 3 month option for the first time. We've got self-development courses that fall on the back of that. We've got an ongoing self-development course. We've got various events that happen throughout the year and meetups that happen locally that are also free as well. So there's lots to do in there, lots to find, and it's worth doing because ultimately it's free. So yeah, come and have a little look and see what you think.
Have you got any, I don't know if the right word is testimonials in that sort of environment, but can you paint a few pictures for the listeners as to some of the people that might have come in, not by name, obviously, but sort of what their reasons were for joining the app in the first place and what they've benefited from over time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million people that I can think of that come into my mind that are all sort of part of the furniture now. Some of them, many of them, you will know as well. What I would say is there's kind of the obvious common denominator is people are absolutely fed up with what alcohol is doing to them, and they've had enough. And it's like it's very much like a relationship when you kind of in one of those relationships where you just ultimately it's gone
Yeah.
one step too far on one occasion and that's it. I've had enough. So then you're open to new ideas, and I think the beautiful frame we put around it provides a really nice, welcome, warm environment, hopefully to come into, and then you feel safe, you feel part of something, and then you can get almost virtually hand holding throughout your first few weeks and days. So yeah, there's plenty of people that will have, and you can look online. There's if you can go into the App Store and have a look at the testimonials on there. I mean, we've never pushed that on anyone. There's literally loads on there that are people that have reviewed the app. So go and have a little look for yourselves.
Matt, it's been a real pleasure. I know I'm slightly biased because I'm a non-drinker, but I do know people that are struggling with the sandwich generation picture that they have to face every day. And I'm not in the business of telling people to do anything, but guiding them and holding their hands towards exploring things. And I think giving up alcohol for a period of time can be frightening, really frightening for people. If you could give just one piece of advice then to somebody that might be thinking, I've had enough. I mean, that was a great phrase you used. I've had enough of drinking. What would you say to them?
I would say don't overthink any duration of it. Break it down to the very smallest denominator. So if you're regularly drinking 5-6 times a week, can you say, right, I'm not going to drink for 2 nights in a row, and see how you feel with that? And the same goes for people that make the decision to stop it. It's like you've got to figure out in your head what's going to be manageable and motivational for you to stick with it. Many people could work with the 1 day at a time strategy. Mine's slightly different. I always said I was going to do 10 years. And because I thought in 10 years I can do a lot and change the world. And it excites me to go and do 10 years, like a chapter of my life, alcohol free, with the carrot at the time being that I could then drink at the end of it. Obviously, 4.5 years into it, I don't know whether I'll still do that or not. I still don't shut the door on it because it provides me with that tease that I need to keep going. So you've got to figure out what works for you, what's going to motivate you to get out of bed and do it in the morning, and what's not going to overwhelm you, and then just take the steps to do it. And if you can do it in a nice, warm, positive house like ours, then give that a go as well.
And you've just reminded me in closing that when I started my journey, for anybody that's listening, I decided to do Dry January. It was 2019, Dry January. I'd listened to a podcast that suggested I give up alcohol for 28 days. And I forgot to start again. So I'm now coming up to 6 years in January. I just forgot that there was an end date that I could stop at. But no, I do feel amazing. And I'm really pleased to live the life I do at the moment. And it looks to me as well, Matt, as if you're enjoying your life being alcohol free.
Definitely, mate. Plenty of challenges, but the challenges are much easier to deal with when you're not boozing, that's for sure. But yeah, I'm loving it, mate. I've got really exciting plans and can't wait for what the next few years brings.
Brilliant, Matt. I've really enjoyed our conversation. One last time, if anybody's sober curious, want to find out more about Dryy, what do they do?
Download the Dryy app in the App Store, wherever you get your apps from, DRYY, or come and follow me on Instagram at Better Life Guy. That's better_life_guy.
Perfect. Matt Pink from Dryy, thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much, mate.